Welcome to the Pocket. I am your host, Scooter, and here for you guys today. We're going to be doing a little off-season overview, biggest need for every team in the NFC West. So far, we've covered NFC North, AFC North, NFC East, and AFC East. So all the other divisions we've got left to cover before March 10th through 12th when free agency negotiations begin and the signings start to flood in. One of the most exciting days of the year. But without further ado, let's get right into this and start with a little division recap. Looking at the standings, the Rams and Seahawks both finished with 10 wins at 10-7, but the Rams with the divisional wins able to secure the division and get into the playoffs. Too bad for the Seahawks. The Cardinals at 8-9. Pretty impressive season. I was pretty on point on this division and the Cardinals in particular about how their season would go, but the 49ers I was not. I don't think anyone else was really expecting the amount of injuries that they sustained. And that really was a difference maker, as a lot of the teams in this division suffered a lot of injuries at one point in the season, but the 49ers just couldn't quite get healthy and managed to lose actually quite a bit of their divisional games. So they finish in last place for what feels like the first time in forever. Let's look at what draft picks they ended up with. Starting off, you have the Cardinals and the Seahawks after the 49ers, who are at 11. So the 49ers are going to pick first, just outside of the top 10. And then the Cardinals and the Seahawks at 16 and 18. And then you have your Los Angeles Rams at 26, as they certainly made it the furthest, the only team to make it into the playoffs. So I would say, just overall, right before we get into it, this is definitely the most competitive and close-knit division. Even the last place 49ers, they were competitive with every team in this division, even beating teams like Seattle pretty handedly earlier on in the season. So this is a very interesting division. In my was I right or where I was wrong video that I did recapping my takes all year, found out that this was definitely the division I was the most on the money on. So let's see if we can keep that going heading into my offseason takes. And let's start things off with the Rams and what they need to do to improve this offseason. What is their biggest need? Well, it's going to be run defense. We saw what happened when they versed the Eagles in the playoffs. Obviously, that run game is seemingly unstoppable to almost everyone, unless if you completely sell out to stop it and then you leave yourself exposed to the passing game. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, even some of the other acquisitions they've picked up at third wide receiver. But yeah, if they want to get over the hump and make the most of the end of the Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford duo and pairing, they're going to have to improve the run defense, because although there was a lot of questions heading into last year about this defense with all the young new pieces, they panned out really well, actually. Picks like Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, but nonetheless, they're still going to need some help on the defensive side and on the interior of the offensive line. So a big talking point for them is that they can end up saving $12.5 million by trading Cooper Kupp before June 1st. Although, now that Stafford is staying, it might seem like, it doesn't make as much sense to trade him anymore. But I don't know. He is kind of old. They've got a lot of the same type of wide receivers like him that were filling in for him already over his injuries in years past. And he is costing a lot of money. I'm not sure if anyone's going to be willing to pick up that contract, but I see them trying to save some money, get some youth injected into the roster. And so let's think about these needs that they have. I did say run defense is their greatest need, but you can address that at a couple different positions. They do need linebacker and defensive tackle. Corner, not really going to help as much with that. They do need more corners though. So I say, with some of that money you save for Puka by letting go of Kupp, let's use some of that to get potential free agent corner Byron Murphy from the Vikings. He's 27 years old. He's going to be well worth it. They ran a very similar defense in Minnesota, probably not to the same extreme that the Vikings run it, but they run a lot of that off zone. So he proved to be very good at that and versatile. He can switch around different spots, the nickel or the outside. So I think that would be a good pickup for them. And so now let's think about the draft. Now that we've addressed corner, looking mainly at linebacker or defensive tackle to improve their run defense, you think about the guys that are going to be there. And I have a bit of a almost complete mock draft. I'm not going to show it to you guys anymore, since I do have takes and picks that I do think are going to happen. But I'll give you, a general idea of the guys who are available after who I have them ending up picking. So there's edge rusher Donovan uh, Ezuraku. I really hope I said that correctly. Out of Boston College, linebacker Jalen Walker, who I've been pretty high on based on his athleticism and versatility. That certainly could be a good pick. Or defensive tackle TJ Sanders, who comps pretty well to a guy like Leonard Williams, but I'm going to have them taking Derek Harmon because he is primarily a run stopper. Braden Fisk is already a really good pass rushing defensive tackle, so I don't think they need TJ Sanders. Donovan, I'm going to call him Ezzy from Boston College. I got to find out how to pronounce his last name. Edge is, always an important position, but they did just acquire Jared Verse, spend a lot of capital on that. Let's shore up, the actual run defense, the actual problem on this defense, and pick up Derek Harmon, who, he definitely could develop into a pass rusher, but if he doesn't, it's fine. You have Braden Fisk, and he's still going to produce as that run-stopping defensive tackle. So, biggest needs addressed for the Rams. Signed free agent corner Byron Murphy. He's young. He fits the system. And in the draft, address the run defense. Pick up a run-stopping defensive tackle. There's going to be a ton of them in this draft, but you want a good one. Get Derek Harmon out of Oregon College. Up next, we got a team that just made a huge trade, trading away their starting quarterback, the Seattle Seahawks. They just traded away Geno Smith to the Raiders for a third-round pick. So now quarterback is going to be one of their positions of need. Their cap space after the Geno Smith trade is $62 million, so that's quite a bit. And they pick at 18. So although they've got a lot of money and they do have a talented defense and some offensive pieces, their draft pick isn't super high, and adding quarterback into the question here doesn't make it any easier for them to address their future. But it's sort of like I said in my reaction video to the Geno Smith trade. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. That it's kind of like taking one step back to take two steps forward. Geno is pretty good, but you know what his ceiling is, and he wasn't getting you past the Rams. So if you can't get through your own division, you're not going to get to an NFC championship or Super Bowl. So I'm good with the move. And you guys know my philosophy at this point, no rush on quarterback, especially not in this year's class. So that makes the biggest need offensive line to prepare for the next guy. And they certainly have money to spend on it now that they traded Geno. For DK, I think they hold on to him for now. That's something we're going to be monitoring post the Geno Smith trade. I think there's, like I said, a lot of needs that they can address on the offensive side through free agency, since this is such a deep defensive class. And fortunately for them, there are some offensive linemen available, and they have a ton of money now, so they can shoot for a guy like Will Fries. But this offensive line has a lot of holes. So I think it might not be a bad idea to take a swing at two starters, kind of like the Giants did last offseason. It worked out pretty well. And they have Charles Cross, who's kind of like their Andrew Thomas. He's like their rock. If he gets hurt, it might not work out so well. But if you sign two guys, at least it might be okay. It might not be a total disaster. So let's get Josh Myers out of Green Bay, 27-year-old guard. They've had great pass protection for years. This interior of this offensive line has been a mess for so long. And then at center, you can also get Drew Dahlman from the Raiders, I believe. He's 26 years old. He's the top center on the market. So that's where you would be spending a decent amount of money on these two offensive linemen. But if you ask me, you shouldn't really blink at, spending money on offensive linemen. It literally helps your entire team. There's probably not I consider the offensive line as like a whole position in a sense, and I get that makes it the most expensive, but that really truly represents, you have quarterback, everyone looks at it as highest paid position, but really the offensive line is the highest paid position. If you have enough good guys in there, they should be making more than your quarterback in total. It's probably what's going on with the Eagles right now. They pay all their offensive linemen big contracts. So let's talk about the draft now. They've signed two offensive linemen so they can address their other needs as well through the draft. But also they have a big issue at quarterback. Like I said, there's free agents. They pick really too low in the draft to bank their future on hoping Shedeur Sanders falls there. I would say could be possible. And there are guys like Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, or Dylan Gabriel in rounds 2 through 4, I would say, that they could consider. But you probably wouldn't want them going right into this offense or this team, especially right as you just rebuilt the offensive line. You'd probably like to see it with a vet behind it first, just to prove that it's not going to completely destroy your rookie quarterback's confidence. So what do I think is best for them? Like I said, it's you take him one step back to take two steps forward, but you do need someone to just be a rental, So the best option, but this team is also ready to compete, right? It's not like you need a regular bridge quarterback like the Raiders needed Geno. You need like you still can take a shot at going on a run this year. And I think the only other team that needs a quarterback that could go on a run is the Steelers, maybe the Vikings, right? But so that where that leads me is that the best option for them is Aaron Rodgers. I get what you have with Fields, Darnold, Russell Wilson, and Daniel Jones, but I don't think Russ is going to want to come back. And then with Fields, Darnold, and DJ, all three of them have struggled their whole careers behind bad offensive lines, especially when the interior rush is getting through. They don't respond well, and I get that we're trying to address that here, but I think, like I said, you want to kind of just let the team have this year to kind of reshape themselves as they prepare for a new quarterback, because you could draft a guy behind Aaron Rodgers and let him who better to learn behind, especially, the passing concepts. A lot of these rookie quarterbacks tend to have a lot more physical traits now, but they struggle in the passing. Let them come in with these physical traits, learn how to pass behind Aaron Rodgers, and then Aaron might even bring in a guy like Devontae Adams, and now you have DK Metcalf, JSN, and Devontae Adams. Whatever money is left over, you spend on the inside of the trenches of both sides. Like I said, you might not be able to get both Josh Myers and Drew Dahlman if you do that, but that's okay, because in the draft, in this case, if you're not picking quarterback in the first round, I would have them getting Josh Simmons at 18, which is a good spot for a lineman. So overall, I don't think this is too bad of an offseason situation for them. They did just move on from Geno, so there's a lot of stuff they still got to figure out, but I think there is an avenue for them. Up next, we got the San Francisco 49ers, and this is going to be a fun one. Positions in need for them are going to be interior offensive line, corner, linebacker, defensive tackle. They got a decent amount of cap space, but they're currently negotiating with Brock Purdy. And what I'm going to say their biggest need is just general trench help, just in general, because this team used to have like a feared front seven. The offensive line didn't have like a ton of studs, but they had Trent Williams and a cohesive unit with Kyle Shanahan's scheme that was more than enough with the weapons to make it, very hard to stop them from, still producing results like a top offensive line. So that's not there anymore. And that's a big reason why they struggled this year. A lot of the moves they've made to try to kind of replace and reload over the years haven't worked. Signings like Javon Hargrave and things like that makes you scared about guys like Milton Williams this year. But anyway, they need trench help. And Brock Purdy just rejected a deal for $45 million a year. Who knows how many years that was? But geez, Brock Purdy, how much are you asking for? If I get you're trying to make the most money as possible, you got to have a hard sell and really squeeze out every last penny. But I mean, at what point do you kind of accept the reality that you're not like these top five quarterbacks? Sure, you have similar qualities to Joe Burrow in terms of processing and things like that, but I don't think he has the same pocket feel or improvisation skills or even physical talent. So, and I would say he's even in one of the most friendly offensive schemes that you could be in, similar to guys like Tua. I'm definitely giving more credit to Jalen Hurts nowadays, but you just got to look at the roster and just admit that, yeah, he's definitely got a lot more help than most guys. So I don't know why he's not accepting that. And where this leads me is I would just force Purdy to play out his rookie contract. That's number one. The 49ers have been here before with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. They what they basically do is they're not going to pay you, and then they're going to draft your backup or your replacement and say, yeah, we're ready for you to leave. Like, go ahead, you can hold out and you can do whatever you want. We're going to be okay. We can move on and we can let it go. So number two, after letting Purdy play out his rookie contract, is plan for the future. There's two ways they can do that this year in the draft, because I don't really see them having all that much money to work with, is to first through the offensive and defensive line. Like I said, it's not what it used to be, so they can address that. Trent Williams and Joey and Nick Bosa only getting older, probably seeing the best of them. And it would be most ideal to get an offensive lineman or an edge with that pick, but they have a second option. Because they do draft so well, they have a particular type, like teams that have a very specific scheme, like I've been saying about the Vikings. I think they know how to get their guys at a bit of a cheaper quality than the more generic teams. So that affords them to have a lot more flexibility with these, first round picks and, the big contracts they decide to give out. And looking at the draft that I had, it isn't all too different from the ones I've shown you guys in the previous videos. Picks through 10. I have Will Campbell as the last guy going and only Cam Ward selected through that bunch. So this leaves the 49ers with a very interesting decision, in my opinion. I have been saying how I don't view Shador Sanders as like this franchise quarterback who can carry like a bottom five team out of the dark ages and kind of revive the team. But what I do think is quarterbacks like that on teams like this are dangerous because they're on that rookie contract. The 49ers would be able to dump this money into the trenches, become who they are again. And you once again have a quarterback on an extremely cheap deal. And that's when they've been at their best. The 49ers haven't made a Super Bowl they haven't made the Super Bowls they've made in recent memory with dudes on contracts. That's not how they've done it. I mean, I guess Jimmy G was on some sort of deal, but that was probably the most expensive one, and it was probably at a discount. So I think Shador Sanders, the way he plays, he's very accurate. He is a good decision maker, and I think he's got a bit better improv skills than Brock Purdy. So having a guy like Shador go to the 49ers or the Dolphins with a coach like Shanahan or Mike McDaniel that can really maximize his decision making, I think it's a good spot for him. I don't think, like I said, that he's going to help these other teams, but a team like this, the Seahawks, if he does fall to 18, the Steelers at 21, we're talking about a completely different situation than him going to, say, the Giants, the Browns, or even the Titans at number one overall, which probably wouldn't happen, but you guys understand my point. So even though you would like to use this first round pick on something in the trenches, you're probably not going to have a season this bad again where you have so many injuries, unless if you do continue to get worse, which you don't want. You want to get back to being who you were. So I say if you do bring in Shador Sanders, also he doesn't have to start right away. He could sit behind Brock. You'll probably get the best out of Brock because he's going to have the fire lit under his ass. And Shador, when the time comes, he can become the future quarterback. So how to address the offseason for the 49ers. You can address the trenches if Shador is not there, but I think if Shador Sanders is there at 11, you draft him. And finally, our last team, the Arizona Cardinals, a team that I had a lot of hype behind, not in the sense I thought they were going to break out, but I just root for them. You guys see the Kyler Murray jersey. I'm a big fan of his game. I'm a defender of his game as well. But let's just talk about the Cardinals. They just need defense. That's their biggest need. They have a ton of cap space, and they pick at 16. 16, isn't that like right down the middle? Well, yeah. And something I want to say about the Cardinals is they sort of serve as the great divide. In terms of teams and my team building philosophy, evaluating where you are and how you should be building your team. Whether you should be viewing it as a rebuild or whether you should view it as going all in. To me, there is no in between, really. You should be accepting your situation because if you're sort of splitting it down the middle, you're not getting in either direction. You're just stuck. You're in purgatory. But the Cardinals, they have, in my opinion, a franchise quarterback that they can build around in Kyler. But what they don't have is a lot of the pieces on defense. The offensive line is okay, but they need help on the interior. They have Marvin Harrison Jr. now, but they don't have a wide receiver too who's really that great. I mean, Michael Wilson's there, but were you really that impressed by the passing game last year? So it's like weird, should the Cardinals be pushing for a Super Bowl or should they be saying like, hey, like we really need to build up this roster slowly but surely. We'll have Kyler for his whole career. It's a tough one, right? But obviously, I don't think they're going to get to a Super Bowl anytime soon, but anything can happen. Hey, they have got a ton of cap space. So let's think about what they're going to do. If you're going to rebuild, you're simply adding young talent for the future. I do actually think you can get a mix of both here because it is so hard to tell where you are. You're in the third year of Jonathan Gannon's era in this Cardinals team, and he's done some interesting things with the defense. Although the roster is terrible, they've had some like very amazing defensive showings, holding teams to less than 20 points like multiple times last year. So I think there is some hope here, and you want to get a mix of talent in here on both sides of the ball. So for defense, they really don't have an actual dedicated edge rusher. They got linebackers like Zaven Collins who will line up as like an under linebacker and kind of be like that far outside where you have like a 4-eye next to him who's like your big defensive end, generally like a 3-tech. But the problem with that is like if the schemed up blitzes aren't working, those linebackers like Zaven Collins, they don't really have the athleticism to consistently go one-on-one with tackles and beat them. They are versatile players, but the trade-off is you don't excel at any one thing. So they need to get pass rushers, actual pass rushers. They, lost Darius Robinson last year, who's kind of like that interior guy. They need guys on the edge. So let's sign potential free agent Khalil Mack. He's a veteran guy from the Chargers. He's got over 100 sacks on his career. One of my favorite players of all time. He's such a beast, but obviously in the later stages of his career, he can't play for you all the time. But that's fine, because you can just have him in as that dedicated pass rushing specialist. Let some of these other younger guys still get out there and develop, but there's one answer. And then also, I think you could take a chance on Chase Young too. Bring in two guys, because Khalil Mack's not going to last too long, but Chase Young could. So if you have him on a larger contract, obviously a guy who's got a ton of potential, I'm interested to see what a guy like Jonathan Gannon could do with these two edge rushers mixed in with all the versatile pieces he has. So now that we've addressed the defense to an extent, let's look at their draft pick and see who they should pick there. Their needs are going to be wide receiver, interior O-line, linebackers, like maybe interior linebacker. They keep drafting these tweeners like Zaven Collins, and then they end up being pass rushers. Defensive tackle. Okay, so with all of those positions in mind, they could really do a lot and just kind of take best player available here. I have them staying put at 16, kind of like the Seahawks. I think it's a good spot for offensive line. And I have Kelvin Banks Jr. falling to them. Young, athletic, strong offensive lineman, tackle. He's going to be out there. You got some older guys there. So even if he doesn't start right away, he'll be good for the future. And that's what I think the Cardinals should do. Sign edge rushers Khalil Mack and Chase Young, and draft offensive lineman Kelvin Banks Jr. You can look for a wide receiver too deeper in the class. You can find if you want like a defensive tackle, like a run stopper, if you just want that role, you can definitely find that deeper in the draft. Obviously, there's players deeper in the draft who end up being great starters anyway, too. So you just got to be a good GM to pull some of this stuff off, but this is what you got to do. All right. So that's going to be all for you guys. Thank you so much for watching my NFC West offseason preview, biggest needs addressed for every team. If you want to see the other videos that I've posted for the other divisions, you can wait until the end screen or click the playlist. I'm going to have all of them in there. If you did enjoy this video, drop a like. Tell me in the comments what you think about all the suggestions I made for these teams. And if you don't want to miss any of the next videos coming out this offseason leading up until the draft, and after the draft when we'll have power rankings, fantasy football, and all that stuff, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss another one. So thank you all again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.